Thank you so much, Brian, and good morning to each of you. When I think of Brian, I think of the acronym EMILY's, early money is like yeast, and that was definitely true when I got a strange phone call from an unknown man who wanted to meet me for coffee to talk about ways to support my work, and that person was Brian. So pick up unknown caller when it rings. One of the things that I am known for is telling people things that they're not used to hearing. So that's where I'm going to start this morning. It's my fervent understanding from everything that I've been able to learn through my work that the only way to save democracy is by engaging, educating, and informing people about gender identity. So I'm going to say that again, because that may be new concepts. The only way to save democracy is by informing, educating, and engaging people on the issues of gender identity. So, like all journalists and all funders, you would say, well, why? What leads you to that conclusion? And what leads me to that conclusion is that a group of people in this country who are seeing fit to bring about authoritarianism and thus an end to our society as we know it and to our profession, which is written into the Constitution to preserve it, have decided to use 1% of the people as a way to not only win elections as a wedge issue, which many people might think of, oh yeah, it's just like any other wedge issue that's been in the past. I wouldn't be so dismissive because we know that wedge issues win elections. But it is also the case that it's not only a wedge issue, but it's an experiment. It's an experiment on how to isolate, demonize, to discriminate, and then to disenfranchise a group of people. And I know that because 1% of the population has been targeted by 500 bills across the country that are anti-trans, from our award-winning investigative series, anti-trans hate machine series. We detail how none of that is an accident. It's all disguised to look like it's organic and localized, but it's the exact opposite. 500 bills passed in 18 states that do a range of things that if I were to pick up this entire room and take you to an entirely different country that you did not know existed, and I would say, in this country, people can be denied health care because of who they are. Schools do not have to be a safe place, and thus a place where people can learn because of who they are. That teenagers can be subjected to random genital inspections by strangers that are appointed by the state. And that parents can be separated from their children because they choose to love them. You would think I was talking about a totalitarian country. You would be thinking I was talking about Stalinist Russia or Italy or Spain under Franco. But that's the reality in the United States of America. That is the growing reality in the United States of America. And the reason why they're doing it is because they know that it works. They know that this approach works. And they know that if they can get away with it for trans people, that they can then begin to mimic this approach to every other single community that they need to remove from society in order to gain and maintain power. That's why I say that there is no way to preserve democracy without educating, informing people about gender identity. So the question is, what do you then begin to do about it? Well, I can tell you what I've done about it. I created TransLash Media. And at the heart of TransLash Media is to tackle the ignorance that drives the ideology of people who believe that they can use the fact that people don't know us as a way to weaken and tumble the foundations of the society that we've all grown up in. And I don't mean ignorance in a judgment. I mean ignorance literally in the fundamental definition of the word, which is the unknown. They do not know. It is an unknown. So what we do is we choose to create content which does two things. The first is it centers our humanity and allows people to get to know us as people. We tell the stories of trans scientists and trans people who are working on AI and trans artists. We demystify who we are. The second thing that we do is that we tell people about the way in which the attacks on us are linked to the survival of everybody else. Those are the two fundamental things that we do. And we do so in as many ways as possible because we know that in a fragmenting media environment, that fragmentation doesn't mean that you do less, you have to do more because people have primary ways of getting information. A podcast audience isn't a YouTube audience, for example. So that means that if you're going to drive understanding and change the narrative universe that we all swim in, that you have to be in more places, not less. And that's why we create short documentaries and films and animated shorts and our two podcasts and our writing platform and a zine and our digital and social media, because all of that is required. And for me, starting this work in 2018, it began as a challenge from other journalists. I was wrapping up another project that was designed to essentially an experiment on what could an alternative news program that reached new audiences look like. And we did that, wrote a report. We got actually a little money from Ford and some other places, and we did that and wrote a report. And then at the end of that, we had a little money. Now, I don't like to tell funders that I spent money on things that I didn't necessarily tell you I was going to spend it on. But we had a little money, and when I mean a little money, it was $7,000. And so I said in our very last editorial meeting, what are we going to spend this money on? And I had all these ideas, I was going to do something with Stacey Abrams, and other people were going to do other things. And one person said, you ought to tell the story of what it is like to be trans in America right now. And that was at the very beginning in the Trump administration when they were beginning to target trans people with specific laws and, with specific executive actions. And those executive actions had been workshopped by the Heritage Foundation for 4 or 5 years and were essentially just wholesale brought into the Trump administration. And the first thing out of my mouth when someone said that to me was, why would I do that? No one's going to care. And when I heard myself say it, first of all, I knew that one, sometimes you don't actually know that you believe stuff until you hear yourself say it. So I knew that when I heard those words pass my own ears, that was not actually what I believed. That's actually contrary to why I do the job that I do. I believe that our job is to make people understand and to make people care. Right? That's what I do. The second thing that I realized is that if I thought that, then that means that everybody else actually thinks that. And that for me then makes me connect and understand why the Christian nationalist authoritarians use the issue of trans people to undermine democracy, because they believe and know that people don't care. So one of the things that we have to do is to get as big as the problem. We have to get as big as the problem that we face on this issue. And so that's part of my challenge, right? I've got to continue to get as big as the problem that we face. Because every single year that I've done this job, that I started TransLash, actually what I did with that $7,000 is that I pulled in a favor. I'm telling y'all a little secret. I pulled in a favor from a friend of mine who was a director of photography on a reality show in Atlanta, and actually essentially made him follow me around the country for a year, and we paid for travel with that money. And then that's created the first docuseries for TransLash out of that. That was kind of on YouTube and did really well. And then from that, could just continue to grow the organization. So that's what I actually did. But every year that I've done the job, it's become more and more apparent to me that the work is vital. Every single year. And that's going to be so in 2024 and 2025. Like, I cannot see a time when this isn't going to be one of the major issues of our time. And that's because it has embedded itself into an entire political party in the United States. And because of an alternative media ecosystem is now finding its way into mainstream media, and therefore is influencing all politics and discussion in the country. The second thing is not only to get as big as the problem, but for all of you to fund the new. To fund the new. Legacy media organizations are vital and important, and they need support. But we have to fund the new if we want to have a legacy media of the future that is worthy of a democracy. Now, funding the new does a couple of things. One, journalism is only going to be saved through innovation, and you're most able to innovate by new things. Secondly, you're able to create possibility models that other people can follow. And the third thing that you do is that you show that there's an audience for new types of information, which then creates the incentive for mainstream media to follow that. Because that's essentially what's happened with Christian nationalist media. You know, it's from my reporting that one of the reasons why we have now pseudoscience about trans people in the New York Times is because the people who lead that organization believe that it's a way to attract what they believe as the main news, the growth area for news in this country, which is conservatives, right? But we have to show that because there are new generations in America that think new, that act new, that want to engage in information that is relevant to them in the ways that are relevant to them, that we have to create the new. We have to show that the new is possible. And the last thing that we have to do is to reimagine journalism. But for me, that means to reimagine who we believe are journalists. It means that people like me and my organizations are seen as legitimate because we follow the method of journalism. You know, journalism isn't an institution with a gold-plated name, right? It's not even necessarily the people that win Pulitzer Prizes. It is a method. It is a method for examining and testing what is true, and then taking what you find and translating it into relatable stories and trusting that your audience can make up their own mind. That's what journalism is. And anyone who does that is worthy of support. Anyone who does that is worthy of support. And the last thing that you'll do by reimagining journalism and funding the new is that you'll be creating the legacy media organizations of the future. Right? The only way you're going to have something in the future is to fund the new things that are coming up now. It's really basic. It's really basic. And so with that as the countdown, as the tyranny of the time of the countdown clock shows me that my time is running out, I hope that you can understand why I began where I began. And why the challenge of how we engage people on this issue, how we create new media ecosystems, how we give people the support to do the vital work of engaging people who care about democracy at scale is the vital work of our time. That is the vital work of our time. That's the vital work of everybody in this room. So I did a lot of talking in heels. But the best thing to do is to show you, right? It's not to stand here and talk longer, although I could. I like y'all. It is to actually show you some of the work. And so what we're going to do now, in just a minute, not yet, I'll give you the cue, is to show a video of a work that we did. So we have our investigative series, The Anti-Trans Hate Machine. It has 2 seasons. We're now working on the 3rd. The 2nd season essentially unpacks the media ecosystem that drives pseudoscience and misunderstanding of trans people that then ends up in conservative media and then ends up in mainstream media. There's like a pipeline. But we know that not everybody has an hour to listen to a podcast. And as I said, not all people are podcast people. So what we decided to do was to accompany each one of those episodes with a short video, a short animated video. Animation does a couple of things. One, everyone instantaneously recognizes and connects with animation. 2, it allows us to connect with younger audiences who are really still into animation. I don't know, anime and a whole bunch of other stuff. My 18-year-old cousins are fascinated by anime. So this immediately engages them. And it's short enough that we can disseminate and distribute it on vital platforms to reach new audiences like TikTok, like Instagram, even YouTube Shorts. And so what I'm going to do is to show you all of the things that I spoke about in the last 15 minutes in about 1 minute and 15 seconds. And I hope that it leaves you with an understanding and an inspiration about why everything that I spoke about and why the work that I spoke about and why the challenge that I laid to each of you is so relevant and so vital. Thank you all so much for your time.
Today I'm going to explore how Abigail Shrier, someone with no real scientific or medical credentials, has become a go-to source for spreading anti-trans disinformation, especially about trans kids, across the media landscape. Shrier started as a lawyer with an Ivy League education, but ended up with an opinion column at the Wall Street Journal. There, she pushed the junk science concept of rapid onset gender dysphoria. Using anti-trans fear ultimately led to a publishing deal for her book, Irreversible Damage: The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. Her book argues that social influences make kids trans, and that parents need to reclaim the home as a place where moms and dads model strict gender roles to stop social contagion. By moving from channel to channel, the buzz around Shrier's book got louder and louder, and eventually became impossible to ignore. She was a regular fixture of Tucker Carlson on Fox News, which, before its cancellation, was the highest news program on any cable news channel, as well as Joe Rogan's podcast, which has an audience of over 11 million listeners, making it the #1 podcast on Spotify, and these are just a few. If vast reach of these outlets and her voice is why the appeal for parents to resist when kids say that they are trans has found its way to ever larger audiences. Share this story and learn more by visiting www.translash.org/anti-trans hate machine.